The exile. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Federation stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floor. Ambassador Marcus Chen stood at the center of the circular chamber, surrounded by towers that rose like silver needles into the artificial sky above. Each tower held one of the 12 founding species of the Federation, and from each tower, alien eyes looked down upon him with judgment already written in their expressions. Marcus was 47 years old, with dark hair beginning to show silver at the temples and eyes that had seen too many diplomatic failures. He wore the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, deep blue with silver trim, and on his chest rested the emblem of united humanity. He had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, learning alien languages and customs, building relationships with Federation officials, and trying to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. Now all of that work was crumbling around him. Supreme Chancellor Zorthax rose from the highest tower. He belonged to the Vecran species, beings of flowing energy contained within crystalline shells that shimmered with inner light. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber like a song made of glass and thunder. Ambassador Chen of Earth, Zorthax began, you stand before the Galactic Federation Council to answer for the actions of your species. The evidence against humanity has been reviewed. The testimonies have been heard. The time has come for judgment. Marcus felt his heart hammering in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. Supreme Chancellor, humanity requests the opportunity to address the charges before any judgment is rendered. A sound rippled through the chamber. It took Marcus a moment to realize the alien counselors were laughing. The sound was not cruel, exactly, but it carried the weight of beings who had already made their decision and found his request quaint. Very well, Zorthax said. Speak, human. We will listen. Counselor Threndak of the Korthari spoke next. The Korthari resembled massive crustaceans with shells of deep purple and eyes that glowed like emeralds. Your species has been part of Federation space for 32 standard cycles. In that time, you have been involved in 17 armed conflicts. Defensive conflicts, Marcus interrupted. Every single engagement was in response to pirate attacks or territorial incursions by non-Federation species. You carry weapons on civilian vessels, another counselor added. This one belonged to the Luminari, beings of pure thought that manifested as shifting clouds of golden light. You train soldiers during peacetime. You build warships when the Federation has maintained galactic peace for 8,000 cycles. Marcus felt frustration rising in his throat. The regions where humanity has settled are on the frontier borders. We face threats that species in the core systems have not encountered in millennia. We arm ourselves because we must. You are aggressive, Zorthax said simply. Your history speaks for itself. Your planet has known almost constant warfare for its entire recorded history. Even now, barely 2 centuries after achieving global unity, your entertainment media glorifies combat. Your children play with toy weapons. Your leaders speak of strength and deterrence rather than harmony and understanding. We have grown, Marcus said, and his voice carried an edge now. Yes, we have a violent past. We do not deny that. But we have learned from our mistakes. We united our world. We ended our wars. We came to the stars seeking friendship and knowledge. And yet you brought your weapons with you, Threndak replied. You brought your suspicion, your aggression, your fundamental nature. Marcus wanted to shout at them. He wanted to tell them that humanity had given everything to earn their place in the Federation. Humans had shared their technology, their culture, their music and art. They had opened their worlds to alien visitors. They had learned 12 different languages and customs. They had bent themselves into shapes that felt unnatural, all to prove they could be peaceful. But peace, Marcus was learning, was not the same as weakness. And the Federation seemed unable to tell the difference. The Council has voted, Zorthax announced. The decision is unanimous. Humanity is hereby expelled from Federation space. You have 60 standard cycles to remove all human presence from Federation territory. Your colonies will be evacuated. Your trade agreements are nullified. Your embassy is closed. After 60 cycles, any human vessel found within Federation borders will be considered an act of war and destroyed accordingly. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Humanity had 7 colonies in Federation space. 5 billion people called those worlds home. They had built cities and farms. They had raised children who knew no other home. They had created lives. You cannot do this, Marcus said, and his voice shook despite his efforts to control it. Those people have nowhere to go. The colonies have populations in the billions. Evacuating them in 60 days is impossible. That is a human problem, not a Federation concern, Zorthax replied. You were warned repeatedly about your aggressive tendencies. You were given opportunities to change. You chose not to. Now you face the consequences of your nature. Our nature. Marcus felt something break inside him. 20 years of diplomacy, of careful words and measured responses, shattered in an instant. You want to talk about nature? Let me tell you what I have observed in 15 years among your perfect federation. I have seen Korthari merchants exploit colony worlds for profit. I have watched luminary philosophers debate the nature of consciousness while ignoring actual suffering. I have observed Vecran administrators care more about procedure than people. The chamber fell silent. Speaking to the council this way was unthinkable. Marcus no longer cared. Humanity's nature is to fight, yes. To struggle and refuse to surrender even when the odds are impossible. But that same nature drives us to protect the weak, to help those in need, to sacrifice ourselves for others. You call us aggressive. I call us survivors. And I promise you this, Supreme Chancellor. You are making a mistake that you will remember for the rest of your very long lives. Zorthax's crystalline form darkened slightly. Your passion is noted, Ambassador Chen. It changes nothing. The judgment stands. Humanity is expelled. You have 60 cycles. Use them wisely. Marcus turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the massive chamber. Behind him, the council was already moving on to other matters, dismissing humanity as a problem solved. Admiral Sarah Cross received the news while standing on the bridge of the UESS Valiant, humanity's flagship. She was 52 years old, a career military officer who had commanded ships for 3 decades. She had fought pirates in the outer reaches, protected colony transports from raiders, and kept peace in regions where the Federation's influence barely reached. Her executive officer, Commander James Park, stood beside her reading the message that had just arrived from the Federation Council. His face was pale. They expelled us, James said quietly. Complete expulsion. 60 days to evacuate. Sarah felt rage and grief warring inside her chest. She had spent her entire adult life serving humanity's expansion into the stars. She had protected colonists, fought enemies, and built the fleet from 12 ships into a force of 300 vessels. Now the Federation was throwing all of it away. How many people, she asked. 5 billion across 7 colonies. The largest populations are on New Terra, Horizon Station, and the Kepler settlements. Sarah did the math in her head. 5 billion people. 60 days. Even using every transport ship humanity possessed, even pushing life support systems beyond their rated capacity, they would barely manage the evacuation. People would die. There was no avoiding it. Send orders to the fleet, Sarah said. Her voice was hard as steel. Every available ship is to proceed immediately to colony systems. We start evacuation operations within the hour. Priority goes to children, elderly, and medical cases. Everyone else gets processed in order of arrival. What about our defensive positions? James asked. Abandon them. None of that matters now. Our only mission is getting our people out. Across Federation space, the evacuation began. Human colony worlds became scenes of organized chaos as billions of people prepared to leave the only homes many of them had ever known. Parents packed whatever belongings they could carry. Farmers looked at fields they had planted with their own hands, knowing they would never harvest them. Children said goodbye to friends they would never see again. On New Terra, Governor Lisa Martinez watched transport ships descend from orbit in an endless stream. The planet had been humanity's first major colony, home to 2 billion people. The capital city of New Hope stretched across a fertile valley, with buildings of glass and steel that caught the light of the system's twin suns. Now those buildings would be abandoned. Humans had built New Terra from nothing, had transformed a barren world into a garden. And the Federation was forcing them to walk away from it all. Lisa was 40 years old and had served as governor for 6 years. She had been so proud of what humanity had achieved here. Now she felt only bitterness. How many transports do we have? She asked her logistics coordinator. 400 in orbit now. Another 600 en route. But Governor, even with constant rotation, we are looking at 8 weeks minimum to evacuate everyone. We only have 60 days. Lisa closed her eyes. Then we work faster. Triple shifts on the transport hubs. Open every landing field. Use military vessels if we must. No one gets left behind. But even as she gave the orders, Lisa knew the truth. Some people would be left behind. The math was cruel and absolute. Humanity simply did not have enough ships. The Kepler colonies faced an even worse situation. Built on 3 moons orbiting a gas giant, they housed 1 billion people who depended on artificial habitats for survival. The habitats could not be moved. Everything humanity had built there would have to be abandoned. Station Commander Robert Kim stood in the observation deck of Kepler Prime and watched the evacuation ships arrive. He was 38 years old and had spent his entire life on the station. His parents had been among the first colonists. He had grown up in these corridors, had gone to school here, had fallen in love and married here. His children had been born in the station's medical center. Now he had to evacuate them all and destroy everything they had built to prevent the Federation from claiming it. "Begin demolition protocols," Robert ordered. His voice sounded dead even to his own ears. "Once the civilians are clear, we plant charges in the primary support structures. If we cannot have our homes, the Federation will not have them either." Throughout Federation space, similar scenes played out on every human world. Humanity gathered its people and its portable assets, leaving behind infrastructure worth trillions of credits and decades of labor. The Federation watched with cold efficiency, making sure humans did not take anything that had been built using Federation resources or technology. Admiral Sarah Cross coordinated the massive operation from her flagship. She barely slept for 60 days, surviving on stimulants and sheer determination. Every day brought new crises. Transport ships broke down. People panicked. Children got separated from parents. Medical emergencies erupted in overcrowded ships. But humanity persevered. They organized themselves with efficiency born of desperation. Volunteers worked themselves to exhaustion. Strangers helped strangers. The strong carried the weak. In humanity's darkest hour, they showed the strength of their nature. On the 60th day, the last human transport ship lifted off from New Terra. Governor Lisa Martinez was aboard, watching through a viewport as her world shrank behind her. The cities of New Terra were empty now, silent monuments to human ambition. In another few years, nature would reclaim them. Lisa cried silently as the planet disappeared from view. She was not alone. Throughout the ship, others wept for homes they would never see again. Admiral Sarah Cross stood on the bridge of the Valiant as her fleet gathered at the edge of Federation space. 300 warships surrounded by thousands of civilian transports carrying 5 billion displaced people. Behind them lay the Federation, already sealing its borders. Ahead lay unknown space, dangerous and unexplored. "All ships report ready for jump," Commander James Park said. Sarah looked at the Federation border one last time. Somewhere behind that invisible line, the Council was probably congratulating itself on solving the human problem. They thought they had seen the last of humanity. They were wrong. "Set course for the frontier zones," Sarah commanded. "Maximum speed. We have people who need new homes, and we are going to find them. The frontier zones are uncharted, Admiral. We do not know what is out there." Sarah smiled, and there was no humor in it. "Good. Then whatever we find, it will be ours. The Federation threw us out because they fear what we are. Let us show them what we can become when we are free of their rules." The human fleet jumped into the darkness beyond Federation space. 5 billion people left behind everything they had known, heading into an uncertain future. They carried with them their anger at the injustice done to them, their grief for the homes they had lost, and their determination to survive no matter the cost. 20 years would pass before the Federation heard from humanity again. 20 years for humans to build something new in the darkness. 20 years for the Federation to grow comfortable in their peace and superiority. 20 years for the universe to prepare a lesson that the Federation would never forget. The lesson would come in fire and blood, and when it arrived, the Federation would learn the true cost of casting aside the one species that could have saved them from the nightmare approaching from the void between stars. The reckoning. The first warning came from a deep space monitoring station on the edge of Federation territory. The station was called Outpost Meridian, a small facility crewed by 63 scientists and technicians from various Federation species. They studied cosmic phenomena, tracked asteroid movements, and maintained the early warning system that protected Federation space from natural threats. On a quiet morning shift, senior observer Krelvan of the Luminari detected something impossible. His sensors showed a massive energy signature approaching from the galactic void, the empty space between spiral arms where nothing should exist. The signature was unlike anything in the Federation database. Krelvan increased sensor resolution and felt something he had not experienced in his 3 centuries of life. Fear. The energy signature was not one object. It was thousands of objects, each one larger than a Federation battleship, moving in perfect formation at speeds that violated known physics. And they were heading directly toward Federation space. "Send an emergency transmission to the Council," Krelvan ordered. "Priority Alpha. Unknown hostile force detected." The message reached the Grand Assembly Hall within minutes. Supreme Chancellor Zorthax reviewed the data with growing concern. The Federation had not faced a genuine military threat in 8,000 cycles. Their fleet existed primarily for ceremonial purposes and minor peacekeeping operations. The ships were old, the crews inexperienced, and the tactical doctrines outdated. "Dispatch the 3rd Defense Fleet to intercept," Zorthax commanded. "And someone find out what we are dealing with." The 3rd Defense Fleet consisted of 42 warships under the command of Fleet Admiral Cormesh, a Korthari officer who had never fought in actual combat. His entire career had been spent conducting training exercises and attending diplomatic functions. Now he found himself facing an unknown enemy with ships that had not been upgraded in 2 centuries. The fleet moved to intercept the approaching threat at the edge of the Andorian Nebula. Admiral Cormesh positioned his ships in a defensive formation copied from historical battles, confident that Federation technology and numbers would carry the day. Then the enemy arrived, and confidence died. They came out of the darkness like a swarm of mechanical locusts. Each vessel was asymmetrical and organic-looking despite being constructed from metal and composite materials that scanners could not identify. They had no visible weapons, no engine signatures, no communication frequencies. They simply moved with terrible purpose toward the Federation fleet. All ships, open fire, Admiral Cormesh commanded. Energy beams and missiles launched from the Federation vessels, painting space with deadly light. The weapons struck the alien ships and did absolutely nothing. The enemy vessels absorbed the attacks without slowing, without damage, without any reaction at all. Then they opened fire. Beams of crimson energy lanced out from the alien vessels. When they struck Federation ships, the ships simply dissolved. Hulls turned to vapor. Shields collapsed. Entire vessels ceased to exist in seconds. There were no explosions, no debris. One moment a ship existed, and the next it was simply gone. Admiral Cormesh watched in horror as his fleet was systematically erased from existence. His tactical displays showed ship after ship going dark. His communication channels filled with screaming and then fell silent. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships, emergency jump. Get out of here." Only 7 ships managed to escape. 35 vessels and 12,000 crew members were lost in less than 4 minutes. The survivors jumped back to Federation space with news that shook the Council to its foundations. The enemy had a name. The surviving crew members called them the Devourers, because that was exactly what they did. After destroying the Federation fleet, the alien vessels had moved to Outpost Meridian. The scientists there had broadcast their final moments as the Devourers consumed the entire station, breaking it down into raw materials that were absorbed into their ships. "What are they?" Counselor Threndak demanded. "Unknown," replied Science Director Velana of the Luminari. "Our analysis suggests they are a form of machine intelligence, possibly millions of years old. They appear to consume all matter they encounter and convert it into more of themselves. They are, quite literally, a plague of locusts on a galactic scale." "How do we stop them?" Zorthax asked. Velana was silent for a long moment. "I do not know if we can." The Devourers moved into Federation space like a dark tide. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply consumed. Every planet they reached was stripped to its core. Every station was dissolved. Every ship was destroyed. Billions of Federation citizens died in the first month as 3 entire star systems were devoured. The Federation mobilized its entire military force. 2,000 warships gathered to make a stand at the Helios system, home to the Korthari homeworld. Every species contributed vessels. Every tactical mind in the Federation worked to develop strategies that might work against the Devourers. The battle lasted 6 hours. The Federation lost 1,800 ships and failed to destroy a single enemy vessel. The Devourers adapted to every tactic, absorbed every weapon strike, and countered every maneuver. When the battle ended, the Korthari homeworld began its evacuation, and 3 billion Korthari citizens prepared to become refugees. Supreme Chancellor Zorthax watched the reports with crystalline hands that trembled with emotion he could not fully express. The Federation was dying. 8,000 cycles of peace and prosperity were ending in blood and fire. Entire civilizations were being erased from existence. "We need options," he told the assembled council. "Anything. I do not care how desperate or unlikely. We need something that can save us." Councillor Mayera spoke then. She belonged to the Whisper Folk, a species of delicate beings that resembled living mist. She rarely spoke in council sessions, preferring to observe and contemplate. Now her voice carried through the chamber with unexpected strength. "There is one possibility," Mayera said. "One species that has proven capable of fighting against impossible odds. One civilization that has survived in regions we deemed too dangerous to colonize." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what she was suggesting. "No," Threndak said immediately. "Absolutely not. The humans are violent and unpredictable. We expelled them for good reason." "We expelled them because we feared them," Mayera corrected. "We feared their aggressive nature, their weapons, their refusal to simply accept peace as we defined it. Now we face extinction, and that same aggressive nature might be the only thing that can save us." "They will never help us," another counselor argued. "We cast them out. We forced 5 billion of their people into exile. Why would they risk their lives for us? Because despite everything we did to them, humans have something we apparently lack, Mayera replied. They have compassion that extends even to their enemies. And because if we fall, the devourers will eventually reach human space as well. Helping us means helping themselves. Zorthax listened to the debate rage around him. The idea of asking humans for help was humiliating. The Federation had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They had cast humanity aside as primitive and dangerous. Now they needed those same primitives to save them. Pride warred with survival in Zorthax's mind. Survival 1. Send the message, he commanded. Reach out to humanity. Tell them everything. Ask for their help. Beg if you must. The message was sent through old communication channels, broadcast toward the frontier zones where humanity had vanished 20 years earlier. For 3 days, there was no response. The Federation braced for rejection, for mockery, for a cold silence that would confirm their worst fears. Then humanity answered. Admiral Sarah Cross was 72 years old now. 20 years in the frontier zones had aged her, but it had also shaped her into something harder than the officer who had led the evacuation. She stood on the bridge of the UESS Indomitable, humanity's newest flagship, and read the Federation's desperate plea. They want our help, she said to her executive officer. Commander James Park had been promoted to admiral and commanded the Second Fleet. He stood beside her now, his hair completely white, his face lined with decades of hard living. After everything they did to us, James said quietly. After casting us out and forcing us into exile. Now they come begging. What do you want to do, Admiral? Asked Captain Jennifer Martinez, Sarah's tactical officer. She was the daughter of Governor Lisa Martinez, who had died 5 years earlier without ever forgiving the Federation for forcing her from New Terra. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the evacuation, about the people who had died because humanity did not have enough ships to save everyone. She thought about the colonies they had built in the frontier zones, carved from hostile worlds through blood and determination. She thought about everything the Federation had taken from them. Send a message to Earth, Sarah said finally. Tell President Wei we need an emergency council session. This decision is too important for the military to make alone. President Jackson Wei was 61 years old and had led Earth's government for 12 years. He had been a young officer during the evacuation, had seen the injustice done to humanity firsthand. Now he stood before the Human Assembly, humanity's governing body, and presented the Federation's request. They want our help, Jackson said. The same council that called us violent animals. The same chancellor who expelled us without mercy. Now they face extinction, and they ask us to save them. The assembly chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives from the frontier colonies were particularly vocal. They remembered the hardships of the early years, the struggle to survive in space the Federation had deemed uninhabitable. Let them burn, shouted Representative Thomas Chen from New Frontier. Let them face the enemy they deserve. We owe them nothing, agreed Representative Sandra Kim from Horizon Deep. They made their choice. Now they can live with the consequences. Jackson let them vent their anger. He understood it. He felt it himself. But he also understood something else, something that Ambassador Marcus Chen had tried to teach the Federation 20 years earlier. When the chamber finally quieted, an old man stood to speak. Marcus Chen was 67 now, retired from active diplomacy but still respected as one of humanity's greatest minds. He walked slowly to the speaking platform, leaning on a cane. 20 years ago, I stood before the Federation Council and told them they were making a mistake, Marcus said. His voice was soft but carried through the silent chamber. I was angry. I was hurt. I wanted them to suffer for what they did to us. He paused and looked around the chamber. For 20 years, I have carried that anger. It has eaten at me, poisoned my thoughts, made me bitter. And now the Federation comes asking for help, and I find that I have a choice. I can hold on to my anger and watch billions of innocent people die. Or I can let go of that anger and remember what it means to be human. They called us violent, Marcus continued. They said we were aggressive and dangerous. Maybe they were right. Maybe we are violent. But our violence has always been in service of something greater. We fight to protect. We struggle to survive. We refuse to surrender because surrender means death for those we love. He straightened as much as his old back would allow. The Federation Council wronged us. That is true. But the billions of citizens living under their rule did nothing to us. They are innocents caught in the path of a threat they cannot stop. And if we turn away from them now, if we let our anger guide us to inaction, then we become exactly what the Federation feared we were. We become monsters who value revenge over compassion. The chamber was silent. Representatives who had been shouting moments before now sat quietly, wrestling with their consciences. I vote we help them, Marcus said. Not because they deserve it. Not because they asked nicely. But because it is the right thing to do. Because we are human, and humans do not abandon people to death just because those people wronged us. We are better than that. We have to be better than that, or what was the point of any of our struggles? The vote took 3 hours. When it concluded, the result was 217 in favor of helping, 183 against. Humanity would answer the Federation's call. Admiral Sarah Cross received the authorization and immediately began mobilizing the fleet. 20 years in the frontier zones had transformed humanity's military from 300 ships into a force of 800 advanced warships. The vessels incorporated technology developed through decades of fighting pirates, hostile aliens, and the simple cruelty of frontier space. The ships were fast, heavily armed, and built by people who understood that every battle might be their last. The crews were veterans who had earned their ranks through actual combat rather than ceremonial duty. They were hard, experienced, and absolutely lethal. All ships, prepare for jump to Federation space, Sarah commanded. We are going to war. The human fleet materialized at the edge of Federation territory in perfect formation. 800 warships appeared on Federation sensors like an avenging angel. The Federation monitoring stations could barely believe what they were seeing. The human vessels were larger than they remembered, more advanced, bristling with weapons that radiated barely contained power. Sarah opened a channel to the Federation Council. This is Admiral Sarah Cross of the United Earth Space Forces. We received your distress call. We are here to help. Transmit all tactical data on the enemy immediately. Supreme Chancellor Zorthax appeared on the communication screen. Sarah saw his crystalline form flicker with emotions she could not read. Shame, perhaps. Or relief. Or both. Admiral Cross, Zorthax said. We, thank you. We did not expect you to answer. You threw us out, Sarah replied bluntly. You called us violent animals and forced 5 billion of our people into exile. But those people are not here to speak for themselves. The people on your world's facing extinction, they did not vote to expel us. They are innocents. And humanity protects innocence, even when those innocents belong to civilizations that wronged us. She leaned forward. Now stop wasting time with gratitude and tell me everything you know about these devourers. We have a war to win. The Federation transmitted 20 years of combat data. Sarah and her tactical staff analyzed it all within hours. What they saw was grim. The devourers were technologically superior to anything in Federation space. They adapted to conventional tactics instantly. They seemed almost invulnerable. They fight like machines, observed Admiral James Park. Pure logic, perfect coordination. They have every advantage. Except one, Sarah replied. They do not know how humans fight. They have faced the Federation, which relies on predictable tactics and overwhelming numbers. They have never encountered an enemy that refuses to follow the rules. She looked at her senior officers. The devourers think war is logical, predictable, controllable. We are going to show them something different. We are going to show them chaos. The human fleet moved to intercept the devourers at the Coreward front, where Federation forces were making a desperate last stand to protect the densely populated core systems. The devourers had already destroyed 6 Federation worlds and were advancing on 3 more. When the human ships arrived, the devourers detected them and adjusted their formations, preparing to erase this new threat as they had erased all others. They expected the humans to fight like the Federation, with organized battle lines and conventional tactics. The devourers were wrong. All ships, execute pattern Omega, Sarah commanded. The human fleet exploded into motion. Ships scattered in every direction, breaking every rule of conventional naval warfare. They did not form battle lines. They did not coordinate their fire. They moved independently, each captain choosing their own targets and tactics, creating 800 separate threats that the devourers had to track simultaneously. Fighter squadrons launched from the carriers and dove into the enemy formation like angry hornets. They flew patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully controlled chaos, forcing the devourers to split their attention across hundreds of tiny, fast-moving targets. Captain Jennifer Martinez commanded the attack wing from her fighter, the Vindicator. She was 35 years old and had been flying combat missions since she was 18. She had survived 12 major battles in the frontier zones and carried scars from 3 near-fatal crashes. All fighters, go weapons free, Jennifer ordered. Pick your targets and make them count. Her squadron dove toward a cluster of devourer ships. The enemy vessels fired their crimson beams, but the human fighters were too fast, too maneuverable. They dodged between the beams, their movements enhanced by neural interfaces that let pilots react faster than conscious thought. Jennifer locked onto a devourer vessel and fired a full spread of missiles. The weapon struck and detonated, and for the first time in the war, a Devourer ship took damage. Not much, just a scorched section of hull, but it was damage. It proved the enemy could bleed. They are vulnerable to sustained fire, Jennifer reported. Multiple hits on the same location can overwhelm their defenses. All ships, focus fire protocols, Sarah ordered. Target sections, not ships. Concentrate your weapons. The human fleet adjusted its tactics instantly. Multiple ships would select the same Devourer vessel and pour fire into a single point. The enemy defenses, designed to absorb distributed attacks, began to fail under concentrated assault. Devourer ships started dying. But the Devourers adapted quickly. They adjusted their formations, shifted their defensive patterns, and began targeting human ships with increased accuracy. The battle became brutal. Human vessels took heavy damage. Ships exploded. Escape pods launched into space carrying wounded crew. People died. Admiral Sarah Cross watched her tactical display and made instant decisions. She pulled damaged ships back, rotated fresh vessels into the fight, and constantly adjusted her strategy to counter enemy adaptations. She had fought 100 battles in the frontier zones, had learned tactics from necessity and survival, and now she put all that experience to work. "Admiral, we are taking heavy casualties," Admiral Park reported. "We have lost 47 ships. Another 93 are heavily damaged." "How many Devourers have we destroyed?" 81 confirmed kills. Sarah felt grim satisfaction. The Federation had never managed to destroy even one Devourer ship. Humanity had killed 81 in the first engagement. They were paying a terrible price, but they were winning. "Continue the assault," Sarah ordered. "All ships, press the attack." The battle raged for 18 hours. Human ships fought with desperate courage, throwing themselves at the enemy again and again. They used tactics the Federation had never considered. Ramming attacks. Suicide runs. Close-range nuclear detonations. Anything that could hurt the enemy. Slowly, impossibly, the Devourers began to retreat. They had never encountered resistance like this, had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice so much for victory. Their logical minds calculated that continuing the battle would result in unacceptable losses, so they withdrew, jumping into deep space to analyze and adapt. When the battle ended, the human fleet was battered but intact. They had lost 112 ships and 23,000 crew. But they had saved 3 Federation worlds and proven that the Devourers could be beaten. Supreme Chancellor Zorthax watched the battle recordings in stunned silence. The humans had fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness. They had sacrificed their own people without hesitation, had used tactics that were as brilliant as they were horrifying, and they had achieved what the entire Federation military could not. "They saved us," Counselor Mayera said softly. "The violent humans we cast out came back and saved us." The war continued for 6 months. The Devourers adapted to human tactics, and humanity adapted in return. Every battle was a brutal exchange of casualties. The Federation provided support, logistics, and repair facilities, but it was human ships that did the fighting, human crews that died in the void. The final battle came at the Nexus Point, a region of space where multiple hyperspace routes converged. The Devourers had gathered their entire fleet there, over 2,000 vessels preparing to launch a final assault that would break the Federation forever. Humanity met them with every ship they could muster. 600 warships, all that remained of the original 800, plus reinforcements that had arrived from human space. The fleet was commanded by Admiral Sarah Cross from the bridge of the Indomitable. "This is it," Sarah told her crew. "This is where we decide whether civilization survives or falls. I will not lie to you. Most of us will not survive this battle. But those who die here will die knowing they saved billions of lives. They will die as heroes." She paused and looked around the bridge at faces she had known for decades. "It has been an honor serving with all of you. Now let us show these machines what it means to be human." The battle that followed would be studied for generations. The Devourers fought with cold logic and superior numbers. Humanity fought with courage, desperation, and absolute refusal to surrender. Ships died by the dozens. Space filled with debris and radiation. Both sides pushed themselves beyond their limits. Commander Alex Torres commanded the battleship Defiant. He was 42 years old and had 3 children back on Earth. His ship was damaged, engines failing, life support critical. The logical choice was to retreat, to save his ship and crew. Alex saw an opportunity. A gap had opened in the Devourer formation, revealing what sensors identified as a central coordination vessel. If that ship died, the entire Devourer fleet would lose cohesion. "Set collision course," Alex ordered. "Sir, we will not survive impact," his executive officer protested. "I know. Evacuate all non-essential crew. Get them to the escape pods." Everyone else, prepare for ramming speed. Alex sent a final message to his family. He told his wife he loved her. He told his children to be strong. Then he aimed his dying ship at the heart of the enemy fleet and pushed the engines to maximum. The Defiant struck the Devourer coordination vessel at relativistic speed. The explosion was visible across half the star system. Both ships ceased to exist, converted to energy and plasma. But the destruction of the coordination vessel had the intended effect. The Devourer fleet lost synchronization. Their perfect coordination shattered into chaos. All ships, full assault, Sarah commanded. Make Torres's sacrifice count. The human fleet poured fire into the confused enemy. Devourer ships died in clusters. Their adaptive defenses failed. Their logical minds struggled to process a situation they had never encountered. An enemy that would sacrifice everything for a chance at victory. The battle lasted 31 hours. When it ended, the Devourer fleet was destroyed. Every single enemy vessel was reduced to floating wreckage. But the cost was horrific. Humanity lost 417 ships. Over 90,000 crew members died. Entire families were wiped out. Veterans who had survived decades of conflict perished in the final moments of victory. Admiral Sarah Cross stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the casualty report scroll across her screen. So many names. So many friends. She had known most of them personally, had served with them for years. Now they were gone. Admiral Park said gently. The Federation Council is requesting to speak with you. Sarah composed herself and opened the channel. Supreme Chancellor Zorthax appeared, and his crystalline form seemed dimmed, as if the weight of everything that had happened had drained the light from him. Admiral Cross, Zorthax said. You have saved the Federation. You have saved billions of lives. We can never repay the debt we owe humanity. You can start by never forgetting it, Sarah replied. Her voice was hard. You cast us out because you feared what we were. Now you know what we are. We are the people who save others, even when those others have wronged us. We are the people who sacrifice everything for what is right. We are human. Zorthax bowed his head. The Council wishes to offer humanity full membership in the Federation. Not as applicants or probationary members, but as equals. Your species has earned a seat on the Council itself. We formally request that humanity join us in governing the galaxy. Sarah looked at the casualty list still scrolling on her screen. She thought about Commander Torres and the thousands like him who had died saving a civilization that had once called them violent animals. I will relay your offer to Earth, Sarah said. But know this, Chancellor. If humanity accepts, it will be on our terms. We will not forget what you did to us. We will not pretend the past did not happen. But we will work with you to build something better. Something that respects all species, not just the ones who fit your definition of civilized. Agreed, Zorthax said immediately. Whatever humanity wants, whatever humanity needs, it is yours. 3 months later, Ambassador Marcus Chen stood once again in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Federation. He was 68 years old now and walked with difficulty. But his mind was sharp and his voice was strong. 20 years ago, I stood here and watched my people be expelled, Marcus said. Today, I return to accept humanity's place among the stars. Not as supplicants begging for acceptance, but as equals who have proven their worth in blood. He looked around the chamber at the 12 towers, now with a 13th tower under construction. Humanity's tower. The Federation made a mistake when it cast us out. You feared our violence and aggression. You did not understand that those same qualities, channeled properly, are what make us strong. We fight, yes. But we fight for others. We struggle, but we struggle for what is right. We refuse to surrender, but only because surrender means death for those we protect. Marcus smiled slightly. You called us violent animals. Perhaps we are. But we are also the animals that saved you when no one else could. We are the species that forgives even when forgiveness is not deserved. We are humanity. And we are here to stay. The Federation Council voted unanimously to accept humanity as full members. Earth took its place among the governing species of the galaxy. Human colonies spread throughout Federation space, welcomed now instead of expelled. Human technology and tactics were studied and adopted. Human courage and determination became legendary. But humanity never forgot the lesson of the expulsion. Never again would they depend on others for their survival. Never again would they allow anyone to define what they were or what they could become. They had been cast out and had survived. They had been called violent and had proven their compassion. They had been written off as primitive and had saved an entire civilization. The galaxy learned many things from the war with the Devourers. They learned that peace maintained through stagnation was fragile. They learned that strength without the will to use it was meaningless. They learned that sometimes the most civilized action was to fight. But most importantly, they learned never to underestimate humanity. Never to assume that violence and compassion could not exist in the same species. Never to cast aside those who were different simply because they made others uncomfortable. 20 years after the expulsion, humanity stood as equal partners with species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They had earned their place not through diplomacy or cultural achievement, but through sacrifice and courage. They had proven that sometimes the strongest civilizations were those forged in darkness, tempered by struggle, and refined by the simple refusal to give up. Admiral Sarah Cross retired at age 73. She lived long enough to see the first generation of humans born as Federation citizens, children who grew up knowing that humanity belonged among the stars by right. She died peacefully at age 84, surrounded by family and honored by an entire galaxy. At her funeral, Supreme Chancellor Zorthax spoke. Admiral Cross taught us many things. But perhaps the most important lesson was this: the measure of a civilization is not in how it treats its friends, but in how it treats its enemies. Humanity was our enemy once, by our own choice and our own fear. When we needed them most, they returned not with vengeance but with compassion. They saved us when they had every reason to let us fall. That is the mark of true civilization. Ambassador Marcus Chin lived to be 92 years old. In his final years, he wrote a memoir that became required reading in schools throughout the Federation. The book's final line became famous across the galaxy: "We were cast out into darkness and told we were monsters. We returned with light and proved we were human." That distinction made all the difference. The galaxy changed after the war. The Federation became stronger, more adaptable, more willing to embrace different perspectives. But at its heart remained the lesson humanity had taught them. Sometimes survival requires violence. Sometimes compassion means fighting. Sometimes the most civilized action is to protect others, even at terrible cost. The Council never forgot their arrogance. They never forgot the price they paid for casting humanity aside. And they never forgot who saved them when extinction came calling. Humanity had been expelled. Humanity had survived. Humanity had returned. And in returning, they had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to be civilized. Not through peace maintained by isolation. Not through superiority maintained by exclusion. But through strength tempered by compassion, through violence channeled toward protection, and through an absolute refusal to abandon others to darkness. The Council had regretted their arrogance. But through that regret, they learned. And the galaxy became better for it. The story of humanity's expulsion and return became the most famous tale in Federation history. Parents told it to their children. Teachers used it in their lessons. Leaders referenced it in their speeches. It became a reminder that prejudice and fear were luxuries no civilization could afford. That strength came in many forms. That sometimes those we cast aside become those who save us. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, carried by subspace signals that would take centuries to reach distant galaxies, a simple message repeated endlessly: humanity, yeah. It was crude. It was simple. But it captured something profound. A species that refused to be broken. A people who turned exile into opportunity. A civilization that saved those who had wronged them. That was humanity. Violent when necessary. Compassionate when possible. Unbreakable always. The galaxy had learned its lesson well. And they would never forget it.